Transnational Threats and Border Insecurity with the Honorable Mariano Federici, Senior Managing Director of K2 Integrity, former President of the Financial Intelligence Unit in Argentina, and former Chairman of the Egmont Group. Professor Jose San Martin, University of Alicante, Honorable Victor Gonzalez, former member of the Parliament of Spain. Gentlemen, the dais is yours. And Honorable Federici, you first.
Wonderful.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Estoy listo.
Thank you. I'm ready.
Robert, thank you, Victor, for that wonderful prayer, and also Lucas for that wonderful voice, which really set a peaceful tone to start the day at the second day of the forum. Thank you very much. And distinguished colleagues, members of Parliament, and representatives of our democratic institutions, I want to speak to you today about an issue that has been generating headlines across Latin America, and that is quite revolutionary in the fight against some of our main threats in the Western Hemisphere, which is the designation of major Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations by the United States. This decision, which was announced earlier this year, marked a profound transformation in how we define and respond to organized crime. No longer are these groups treated merely as transnational criminal organizations engaged in profitable but localized criminality. They are now classified under U.S. law as foreign terrorist organizations in the same legal and operational category as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah. This change has real and profound implications. As transnational criminal organizations, cartels can be prosecuted, surveyed, and sanctioned. But as FTOs, as foreign terrorist organizations, material support becomes a federal crime, whether that support takes the form of weapons, services, logistics, financial transactions, or even inadvertent commercial engagement. Asset freezes are automatic. Immigration restrictions and extraterritorial jurisdiction follow. And U.S. law enforcement is now authorized to use the full scope of counterterrorism tools, intelligence operations, extraterritorial indictments, and financial warfare. This decision was not political symbolism. It was a legal, operational, and diplomatic rupture, and one that reshapes our obligations across the Atlantic and beyond. The cartels in question, most prominently the Jalisco Nueva Generación cartel and the Sinaloa cartel, the largest criminal organizations in Mexico, are not merely trafficking organizations. They are de facto insurgent groups with military capabilities, territorial control, and an unrivaled capacity for corruption, coercion, and social penetration. They govern through fear, co-opt local and national institutions. They assassinate journalists and judges. They wage asymmetric warfare against both the Mexican state and international partners. Their networks now extend far beyond drugs into human trafficking, illegal mining, extortion, cybercrime, and control of global supply chains. But their most dangerous weapon is not their firepower. It is their ability to launder power and profit across borders through the global financial system, banking, trade, real estate, logistics, and cryptocurrency. And here a central enabler also emerges, as I mentioned yesterday in my speech about China, the Chinese networks. Chinese chemical suppliers have become the backbone of fentanyl production, shipping precursors, often labeled as industrial inputs, through Hong Kong, India, or directly to Mexican ports like Manzanillo and Lázaro Cárdenas. Once synthesized by cartels, the final product moves north into the United States, Canada, and increasingly Europe, fueling an overdose crisis of mass casualty proportions. Meanwhile, Chinese underground banking systems are laundering cartel proceeds through parallel value systems, circumventing capital controls, using trade-based schemes, and offering anonymity in exchange for commissions. The result is a strategic convergence of Mexican violence and Chinese financial opacity, convergence that is now formally recognized as terrorism financing architecture. This brings us to the U.S. rationale for FTO designations. The U.S. administration has made clear that cartels are no longer simply criminal threats. They are national security threats, and their financial, logistical, and chemical supply networks represent an existential risk to public health and the rule of law. Fentanyl, Robert, has killed over 100,000 Americans per year in the last few years. No terror group has infiltrated that level of harm, and the state capture effects these organizations generate in Mexico have now spilled into global commerce. By invoking the FTO designations, the U.S. is signaling not just enforcement escalation, it is asserting strategic parity between cartel networks and terrorist organizations. This move brings with it a paradigm shift in legal exposure for foreign banks, commercial actors, and state institutions engaged with Mexico. Let me be clear. This designation has already begun to reshape the global financial landscape. Most Mexican banks lack the internal capabilities to understand the risk of providing, even inadvertently, material support to designated terrorist organizations. There is no culture of proactive financial intelligence. There are no structured regional risk maps. There is limited use of network analysis or enhanced due diligence in cartel-dominated territories. Banks operating in states like Guerrero, Michoacán, and Jalisco may be unknowingly servicing front companies, cartel intermediaries, or laundering pipelines. And yet, U.S. law does not require intent. Recklessness is sufficient to trigger liability. This leaves Mexican banks vulnerable to loss of correspondent relationships, asset freezes, and criminal proceedings. But the risk does not end in Mexico. Foreign banks, especially Spanish institutions that operate in Mexico while maintaining U.S. correspondent accounts, are also exposed on both sides of the Atlantic. If a euro-denominated transaction clears in dollars, for example, it passes through the U.S. financial system. And if that transaction is later linked to a cartel-affiliated entity, the bank may be liable for material support, even if the transaction originated in Madrid, Mexico City, or in Brussels. The threat is clear. Spanish and even European financial institutions must urgently assess and reconfigure their risk posture in Mexico, not later, not when it is convenient, but now. The private sector is not exempt. European companies, especially in construction, energy, infrastructure, agribusiness, tourism, and logistics, may be operating alongside municipal contractors, subcontractors, and suppliers with covert cartel ties. These firms often operate in cartel-dominated areas or in the industries, which is now pretty much most of Mexico, where land control, security, or transport depends directly or indirectly on cartel acquiescence. FTO designation makes these interactions legally explosive. Any commercial relationship that can be construed as facilitating material support, security services, real estate leases, warehousing, financial facilitation can trigger U.S. sanctions, criminal liability, or reputational collapse. So foreign firms must implement FTO-specific risk assessments, contractual disengagement protocols, beneficial ownership and network screening, and contingency planning for reputational and financial exposure. And yet, in the face of all of this, we see a dangerous institutional standoff. Mexican authorities claim they have received no formal guidance from U.S. counterparts on how to manage the implications of FTO designations. U.S. agencies on their end counter that it is not their role to instruct foreign governments on how to manage their risks. Meanwhile, the cartels adapt, they restructure, they exploit the vacuum. This posture of diplomatic distance and strategic ambiguity is unsustainable. It fails to support the very institutions we seek to strengthen. It isolates legitimate businesses. It fosters confusion in the financial system, and it emboldens the cartels who thrive precisely when the state hesitates. The path forward is not abstract. We must establish internal financial intelligence units in Mexican and regional banks, invest in intelligence-led compliance, create a U.S.-Mexico, and why not also EU, public-private financial integrity partnership, re-establish a bilateral illicit finance dialogue with full private sector participation. But above all, we must recognize the value of shared information and technology platforms. The most effective weapon we have is not a drone, a raid, or a sanction. It is the real-time sharing of actionable intelligence across institutions and borders. Platforms that integrate law enforcement alerts, trade anomalies, beneficial ownership registries, blockchain analytics, watch list-based AI risk scoring. This is the future of financial security, and it must be built cooperatively. Colleagues, we must stop pretending that we have time. The designations have been made. The liability landscape has changed. The rules of engagement have shifted. Our choice is no longer between action and inaction. It is between shared resilience and fragmented failure. This is not just Mexico's challenge. It is ours, Europe's, America's, and the global systems. If we allow these networks to operate unchecked, we risk the very foundations of our financial integrity, our border security, and our democratic institutions. Let us not waste this moment. Let us meet the threat with clarity, courage, and coordination. Thank you very much.
Outstanding.